Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We're going to take a look at arpeggios in this video, and we're going to look at 3 different ways that are really easy to create, and you can get started pretty much straight away with your own ideas. And we have the first one here, so let's take a look at the one in yellow. These are 3 different ideas based on the same 3 notes. This one is just the standard rolling upwards sort of thing that you would get, and I've just put it into a pattern where it starts on the beat, then off the beat, then on the beat. As you can see, it creates just a nice simple pattern, and it's really easy to create. So we can create different ideas based off that idea. We can start building in lower ideas, so we can just fill the gaps in with some rolling notes. So we could have a rolling bass on that root note. Or we can have a little bit of movement like you can usually do with that sort of thing, and say have every second one up an octave. We get a little bit too much going on in there, so we don't do things like that. But how can we spice this up to make it sound a little bit better? And what we'll do is just drag this over here, and I'll show you the standard upwards rolling effect, which is just duplicating these one after another, as you can see, and then just drop that there. That's a standard upwards arpeggio, and if you wanted the downwards one, you'd obviously reverse that, so the C would be here, the F would be in the same place, and the B would be in this position, and then it would be a rolling downwards. So really simple ideas, and you can create that pretty much straight away with the own chord sequence that you have. So how can we make that more interesting? This is leading on to idea number 2. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what's going on. We still have the same notes there. If we look back at our first one, B, F and C, forget that they are sharps or anything, so B, F, C is there. When we jump in here, we can see B, F and C. They're in different positions, but we have other things happening in between. So let's eliminate what has been added in to start with. So these 2 notes and these notes. I've put a D in there, so if we took that away, this is what we'd have. Oh, nothing too fancy, but we seem to have a very similar rhythm to what we had before, but it sounds a little bit different. And that's because the spacings are different, and we haven't started on the beats here. These are in between. And it gives a little bit more of a groove and a bit more of a vibe, depending on what you're trying to create, but it just gives it a little bit more life, and it sounds better. And undoing the first change that we did, there is a D in there. Now, depending on scales, we're not going to go into scales again. If you need to know anything about scales, I have a few other videos, and you can use scales-chords.com. Link is always in the description to there, and that will give you the scales that you need. Or if you've already created chords, you can put the individual notes in there, and it'll suggest what scale it might be. Now, the reason for choosing D there is if we look at the spacings here, we have our 3rd note in the sequence, so that's our root note. C sharp is our 2nd, and then D is what is in the 3rd position. So the 3rd note, and then you can see the 4th on E, and then the 5th on F. Now, we've created a standard chord there. If you put them together, that would be your 3-note triad, and that's why that is appearing there. So it's adding a little bit of variety into there, but it's utilizing the initial chord, and the C sharp at the top is part of the original sequence we had. But if you just wanted to look at that, you can see if we drop that 1 octave down, you can see where it would be positioned in the scale. So essentially, we have just risen up the scale, and you can see it would be B, C sharp, D, and then F. So those first 3 notes are the first 3 parts of the scale. You could call that chromatic if you wanted to, but the way we've positioned it, they are up here, up top, to give it that little bit of life and extra interest into the sound overall. So taking another step backwards, let's just undo those. Another step backwards, you can see that these B notes get introduced. Now these are the root notes again of the scale, and you can see that the bass note starts on the beat, which is essentially filling the gap. And then we have 2 here and here. So if we shorten that down to there, so you're only focusing on those first 2 bars, you can see the second one is a repeat. So we have these spaces filled in, but we do have this one here still free to go. So how have we done that? We filled it in by adding another B in, but just transposing that one octave up. So usually it would be there, so you get this, or this. It makes it sound faster doing that way. This one gives an obvious gap in your sound at this point. And if that's something you're looking for, then that's absolutely fine, but I've gone for an octave above. It just gives it a little bit more speed and a little bit more direction. It sounds a little bit better to my ears. But again, building arpeggios, everybody likes to do it in a different way and achieve a different sound. And again, if you're trying to produce a certain type of trance, you might be going for a certain sound that requires it to sound a little bit faster rather than having that kind of disjointed gap in that section. And finally, we have arpeggio number 3, and this is in green. So let's have a listen to that before we get started. Well, I've added some bass notes in there for variety. If we take them away for a second. I'll put them back in. And let's analyse what's going on. So you can see we've gone back to this triad idea that I explained earlier. We have the B, the C sharp and the F, and that's making our triad chord. But instead of having that D there that we had, we've got the C sharp. So we've created our chord and we've just used that in a rolling up pattern. So if we take away this top melody for a second, this is the standard upwards arpeggio. So you can see no gaps in between any of the notes at all. And then instead of starting here, I've just made it so it kind of rolls down into that middle note and back to the start, just to keep the flow even. And then you can see if we undo this again, let's just undo those changes, we've added in this top section. It's essentially a melody, but it does add to the style of the arpeggio, and depending on the sound that you choose, which we'll talk about in a second, this could add that final touch to your track. So you can see here, we've started on B, the root note, just to keep this really, really easy to understand. We started on the root note. Then we've gone to the F, which is the 5th of that chord. And then I've started to just climb down to the E, because I wanted the melody to fall a little bit, down to the D sharp, and then back up to the F sharp there. So really simple. We've got the root note and then the last note. So we've used those two notes of the chord, missing out that C sharp. Then we've used E, which is next in the scale. And then we've used the D sharp, which we don't use again in the triad, but it's just so it keeps falling chromatically, if you want to look at it that way. And then we're back up to the F sharp. So essentially we've only used 1, 2, 3, 4 notes, and then these two are repeats. And you can hear a direction for the track now. We can hear when we just listen to this, I can hear in the back of my mind that that bass is going to rise and the chords are going to go up a little bit higher. And it starts to generate ideas in the back of my mind, and then that's how the track starts moving and flowing forward with the ideas. And finally, earlier we touched on the idea of sound. That can make or break an arpeggio in your track. You've got to pick sounds wisely. Don't just pick anything. Even if it sounds really good, does it fit with your track? If not, ditch it. I always say this, it's the same thing over and over, and you'll get used to hearing it because that is the truth. This sound sounds really nice. It was perfect for the demo. There's no track here at the moment. This is just a demo. And you can get that from my preset pack, which is through Spire's website, Reveals Sound, and you can get that there. Trance Euphoria link is always in the description. So let's have a listen to what this sounds like when we just move around the filter a little bit. Gives it tons of dynamic, it sounds nice. I'd probably change slightly the envelopes just so it doesn't go too closed and too short. But that's all down to taste and the style of track you are trying to create. For example, if we jump into here and pick a different one, we want to load this one, so Felina. That is not a good sound choice. can't see it working in a track. You could maybe do it at a push just to support in the background and add a little bit of fill out. There's never anything to say you can't, but overall, you just skip past that sound straight away. It's designed for a different type of production. Too much low end in that one. Let's try Hyper AM. This one could work, but we're going to have to transpose this up, so let's just quickly transpose that 1 octave. And with a little bit of extra tweaking on the sound design, we could use that in the sound. But you can see how just using the wrong sound makes it sound pretty nasty, and it's not what we want. So you can see we have 3 arpeggios, and we've gone from really, really simple sound to literally having nothing happening but the 3 notes that are arpeggiating upwards, to giving it a little bit more complexity just by spreading out the design and adding a few extra notes, and then finally hitting the big jackpot of having something that's quite nice sounding. And you can develop this even further. There's nothing to stop you jumping around a little bit and using the scales. So for example, we could, instead of having this C, we could have a D sharp. It just adds that little bit of extra variety and really generates some interest in the sound. You think, that sounds a little bit different. I wonder what they did just in that section to make that sound a little bit better than just something repeating over and over. And you'll have seen plenty of my arpeggiated videos. There is a dedicated playlist to it, so this is part of it. I'll put the link on screen now for you so you can see that playlist. And I do encourage you to watch the playlist because it's dedicated to that exact thing that you want to learn, and you might find a video that you can't find just by sifting through the back catalogue of videos that I do have. And there we have it. That is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the video and it opened your eyes a little bit more to arpeggios and just give ideas. Feel free to use those ideas, but you can get the MIDI from my Patreon page if you're a supporter over there as well. So you can just download it without having to screen grab it and draw it. But either way, you can get hold of that MIDI really easily. And thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below. Also hit the like button, and finally hit subscribe and the bell icon if you haven't already. The bell icon will make sure it appears in your news feed and you get to see the video as soon as it's uploaded. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.